Hi guys, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Yvonne and you are on Ginger Chick Rehab, where I love to take secondhand items, things that I found out while I was thrifting, and to share the process with you all of how I make these items over and give them new life. Look at this little trio of stacking boxes. Though they're already primitive, they got an apple on the top. We can change that out. That's not any big deal. It's just a screw on. Now, normally hinges would be something I would take off along with taking off this little knob that's on the top. But over my time of flipping items, I know that these hinges are very weak. And a lot of times trying to even unscrew them, you end up stripping them out. So today's makeover, the hinges are staying on. So I'm just using some 220 sandpaper. Luckily the images are not raised all that much, so I'm just making sure that everything is smoothed down. I want to give a nice prepped surface for my paint to be able to grab on. Along with the scuff sanding, I'm going to go ahead and get these all washed up, just using some Dawn dish soap and some hot water, and then set them off to the side and let them thoroughly dry. I don't know about you all, but when it comes to cubbies or boxes or inside shelves, spray painting is the easiest, and I need to prime these, cover up the cream color that's going on in the inside along with spray painting the outside. So I'm just using Rust-Oleum's 15-minute enamel paint. It's a great base, a great primer, and it can be your finish coat if you wanted it to be. So I'm going to be using Sweet Pickins Basil on these boxes. I can imagine getting a little bit of crackle going on there along with this yummy green vintage colors. After my first coat is completely dry, I'm going to go in with a second coat, and then that's really going to grab onto that first coat and really give it some coverage. Now I just let these dry on their own. I didn't add any heat gun or anything to help them along. I just love that perfectly imperfect of how milk paint works. I assumed that this would happen, that since I didn't tape off or anything like that, since the black paint was freshly painted, I didn't want to just risk paint or tape taking the paint off. So just a little bit of an X-Acto knife just to break that seal of where it had been painted together. I got a little cleanup to do on the inside, but when milk paint hasn't been sealed in yet, a lot of times you can go ahead and wipe a lot of that off, and I can always touch up paint that area too, just to give it a cleaner looking edge. I want to step these up a notch and make them really look like they have some age to them by adding black wax. Yep, straight black wax. I know it always looks scary at first, but it does really tone down that bright green and really give it that true basil color. So putting that on the edge, and then I'm taking some clear natural wax and then just rubbing the two together. Oh, look at that color change. Now that I have the box all waxed, I'm going to go and open it back up and then give some attention to those areas. I'm just using the Fusion's Coal Black, and that matches up with that enamel paint wonderfully. And just going ahead around that entire edge, just getting it nice and cleaned up. And I went into my knob stash. Doesn't everybody have a knob stash? So I found this crackling, crazened porcelain knob, which I thought the crazened almost matches the color of the basil. Oh my gosh, that is a perfect match. I do think the front of these boxes need some embellishment. So I went to my save files, and these are downloads that I paid for off of Etsy, so they're always there for me to use. So now I just need to measure each one of the individual boxes, size the image to what I need it to print out, and just printing it out on plain old copier paper. So I'm trying to find 3 coordinating images. So I stacked my boxes one on top of the other just so I can get a visual when I'm centering the paper. So really all I'm going to be doing is decoupaging these on, just cutting the images out from the copier paper and Mod Podging them onto the box. So I don't feel like this needs anything fancy, no extra paper, no thickening of the paper. With that background, I think the green is not going to interfere with what the paper is, so just putting a nice even coat, nice and thin, but enough that it doesn't dry so fast that when you go to put it on. So yeah, all the way out to those edges. So here's some items that you see a lot when you're out and about. Some canisters, maybe a crock. Okay, well maybe not the sugar molds candlestick holder, but clear glass canisters that are always mismatched. But I think we can make this trio into a beautiful matching set. Well, I've already taken the time to wash these up, some Dawn dish soap, some hot water, let them completely dry overnight. Now the 2 have the same kind of like markings, but the little one, not so much. But, you know, I think it'll be close enough. We're going to start off with using some more of that spray enamel paint in the flat matte so that it's not shiny. And they are going to need their underbellies done also. And while I'm spray painting those up, you would think that this one would be all good. But when I thrifted it, it's got some weird sticky on it. So even after I washed it up, it still had a weird sticky texture to it. So we're going to go ahead and get this sprayed up. So hopefully that sticky will go away. So have you seen the new Fusion paints? I absolutely love this Carriage House color. There's just something about that old timey green. So yes, I am going to paint these tops with it. Oh my gosh. Does that not just scream a vintage canister vibe? But I am going to go ahead and just take this up a notch just by adding a little bit of black wax, the Jolie's wax, and a little bit of clear wax, and that will just pop that color even more. So I'm going to go back to my save files. I know I have some of these yummy labels that I got off of Etsy. I love everything about this label. So definitely has that old-timey vibe that I'm looking for. So same thing, I'm going to go in and copy and paste it. I'm going to put it into my Excel program so then I can size it appropriate to each one of the canisters. And while I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and do my Cranky Blackbird coffee, one of my best sellers. I do not know where that digital download on Etsy is anymore. I am so sorry. I tried to link everything I can down in my description box to Etsy if they are still available. So just like earlier, I'm just going to go ahead and cut these out, just plain copier paper. It seems to work perfectly for Mod Podging decoupage onto items. So on these, I'm just trying to get as close as I can, not leaving any of that white edge. Now there are two different downloads when you do this one. It's a white background, or you can actually have a black background. I like the color font of that creamish on the lettering a little bit more than the white of the black background. So these are pretty straightforward with just Mod Podging them on, but now I need to seal them in. Yes, you don't want to immerse them in water. You can put a note. I hope people use common sense that it's paper on glass when purchasing them, just to, hand wash them only. But yes, I'm just using some weather defense. So there's a couple different ways you can seal that in. You can use more Mod Podge that sometimes makes it really shiny. A polyacrylic spray. I just chose to grab the weather defense. And if you start wiping it off as soon as it's put on the glass, it will wipe right off. Since this one is a square and easily able to tape off, I'm just going to go ahead and do some masking tape. So I guess that you could say I'm a sucker for stacked boxes. Look at this little trio here of shaker style boxes. Though you can tell they need a little bit of help. Top coat seems to have ruffled, starting to lift. So I think I can just sand it off. But when I got into sanding on it, I quickly realized that it was like a wax coating, kind of like a wax paper of sorts. So not as quite as easy to get off as I thought when I saw them in the thrift store. So with a little bit of help of a razor blade, trying to, what lifts, and what doesn't want to lift doesn't want to come off. But once I could get some lift there, I could peel the rest of it off. The covering, for some reason, was only on the lids, but not on the boxes themselves, which meant a little bit more of the paper came off than I would have liked. So before I even start to paint them, I'm going to go ahead and fill that porosity of that really dry paper in with a couple coats of shellac, and that'll build up nice and hard so that it will be paintable. Then after my couple coats of shellac dries, I'm going back in with some more of that enamel black paint. I want to fill in that burgundy color that's in the inside, and I want to make this their primer coat, make everything nice and even. So I have a little sample here of Sweet Pickins milk paint in the color Soup Case. Oh, so I kind of can imagine putting it on these little shaker boxes, kind of giving it a leather look. I know when you get that first coat on, you think, oh, that's not much coverage at all. But once you get that second coat on, it really starts to adhere to each other. And I love the richness of this brown. So now that that second coat is dry, I know it looks kind of chalky, but don't be afraid. So now what I'm going to do is I have a mixture of Jolie's black wax and some clear wax. Oh, I got a couple little spots that seem to still be a wee bit wet, so I'm just going to touch them with a heat gun. I didn't help anything along to crackle. I just let it do whatever it was done. It did. And if it crackled, it crackled. If it didn't, it didn't. So back in my downloads, I go to see what I have downloaded from Etsy, and I have these cute little sheep that are multiple sizes. So that's one of the reasons I like to do downloads from Etsy, is because I can size it appropriate. Sometimes decoupaged paper is just what it is. It's meant for like bigger pieces, and not always can I find smaller to fit on. So Etsy is a nice resource to find smaller images. I printed out multiple sizes of these so I can make sure that I had the sheep that I wanted to use. Yes, I'm just going to cut out around the sheep because that is all that's going to fit on these little boxes. Unlike the first images I did on the trio boxes, I'm going to back these with some copier paper with some Mod Podge. That way I can burn my edges. I know that each image isn't necessarily square the way that I cut it, so this will kind of hide those imperfections. So yes, after burning all four sides, it kind of gives it that black edge, hides the unperfect of cutting it straight. So a little bit of Mod Podge on the back, and then when it dries, I can put a little bit more Mod Podge on the top to seal it in. But tearing them down here will help me kind of visually be able to just eyeball centering these three together. While my Mod Podge is still just a little bit wet, I'm going to go ahead and add some antiquing glaze. That'll just kind of blend in those edges and really go with that center image. Now, not every makeover has to be so many steps, so much done to it, as in case of this clock. So it looks like it was just maybe TJ Maxx clearance. I'm not sure. That looks like a clearance tag to me. But I always am looking for, can I take the clock apart? It doesn't necessarily have to come apart, but it is easier to paint if I can remove the glass. And then we'll go ahead and see if we can get these tags removed. Sometimes easier said than done. So that cardboard kind of likes to keep the tags, but it wasn't too bad taking them off. I'm going to get this cleaned up with some Dawn dish soap, some hot water. I cleaned it up before, but I didn't really study on taking the glass out, but now that I could remove the glass, even better. Yep, you guessed it. I'm going to take it and I'm going to use that spray enamel. I just like to really prime my piece if I can. I don't want to sand metal too awful much to prep it because a lot of times you can see all those marks. But this is a wonderful primer, a great start color. It can be your finish color as well. And I think this looks beautiful in black. That'll really accentuate the face and those numbers, but I am going to go ahead with some of the Fusion Cast Iron. I really like this very deep gray, almost black color. So I'm going to not paint the feet or the handle on the top and just kind of give it a tone on tone type of effect. So do y'all pick up these little cubbies when you see them out in the wild? This one was just $1 at a yard sale. Oh my gosh, handmade piece. She said her dad made it back in the 1960s. I love that it has 2 drawers in it and they're just so fun to style. Tabs are super easy to take off. They are just screw-ins. I'm going to go ahead and take the hanging system off the back of this. It hangs higher than what the cubby is, though it's those darn flatheads that aren't always as simple to get off, but somehow we will make it work. Then I'll take just a little bit of wood putty and fill in those holes. So I need to sand the smooth, just the top coat may have bubbled over time. The back you can see that the top coat has run down, so we're going to go ahead and get that nice and smooth along with where I put the putty, and then just sand the entire piece to give it that nice prepped surface so that paint will adhere. And the nice part of prep is you can tell when something was loose. Like, so when I was sanding, that nail hit my sander, so we'll just hammer that back in and proceed on sanding it. Did as much sanding as I could with my Orbital sander, but there's just those corners that you just can't get that sander into, so I just hand sand it. If you don't, you're really going to be able to tell when you go to paint it. My next part of my prep is taping off, so I want to leave a clean edge on these little drawers, along with where the drawers slide in and out. So did y'all hear me mention that I really love this color? Yeah, Carriage House. Y'all, you need to try it. It is amazing. Not only is the color amazing, but Fusion paint is amazing. Paint, primer, top coat, all in one. Primer, top paint, top coat, whichever order y'all know. Anyway, yes, so I just love how it just goes on so nice and smooth. So today I did 2 coats to cover, it's completely dry, and now I want to give it some age. I really feel like this is an old timey color. And I know you're like, oh my gosh, you're taking so much paint off. But I want this, it's my look. It's just, I love that old timey look. I love pieces that tell a story. So I'm constantly trying to reproduce that look in the items I make over. And then Carriage House is beautiful in itself, but adding a black wax and a natural wax to blend it all together just takes it to the next level. It just gives it that age I've been touched a million times kind of look. To freshen those knobs back up, I'm just going to be using a little bit of the Ebony Rub and Buff. I don't want them to look, I don't want to spray paint them and make them look all brand new. I want that Rub and Buff's going to give it that little bit of a worn look. Now here is an item that I have thrifted and flipped so many times, I'd have to go back through videos to count. I'm not doing that. But yes, underneath these flowers is a home interiors candelabra. I'm not sure. They must just be very popular to donate in our area. The only prep I do to that candelabra is I clean it. The more I sand it or anything like that, it causes white paint to bleed through. So I'm not messing with that. So for my paint color, I'm going to try a different technique. I have done Vaseline, glue, crackle, chalk paint, distressing. So heck, why not do some milk paint and see if it gets chippy. So I'm using flour sack for my paint color. I did mix up my milk paint a little bit on the thicker side only because of how this is and how I know that it'll probably run if I get it too watery. Y'all that have used milk paint know that it is unpredictable. You do not know. You don't know. Even with trying a heat gun, there was no crackle to be found. It just wasn't doing, even without, like, I didn't really do any prep, so I thought, oh, this will definitely crackle. Nope, it didn't. That's okay. So we're going to help it along by distressing it with some 220 sandpaper and just kind of let the paint come off where the paint will come off. The nice thing about milk paint, it does sand fairly easy. And when you sand it, oh my gosh, it is so smooth. For this piece to seal my milk paint in, I'm just using the clear wax. I don't want to darken it up. I want that wax to seal that paint in. I want to make it nice and smooth, and I want it to pop where that natural wood underneath is showing through. think our job as a flipper is not to question why. We just have to have the vision. Can I make it better? Can I change that? Can I make it a little bit more desirable? I am not sure why this was dry brushed in pink. Not a clue. What I did know as a flipper is these are good at selling items. So for the $5 at a garage sale, I'm going to take my chance to see if I can sand it off. I didn't really want to get it down to the natural, though I have taken them all the way down to the raw wood and they have sold well that way also. But I wasn't sure with the imperfections in the wood and how deep did the paint get, and I can tell there was pieces and parts that had some dry brushing of white also. Luckily, the paint did not go too deep inside the holes. There was a little bit that had went in there, but the holes were really rough, so I'm just going ahead and trying to smooth them out. So I can't say that I got every single piece of pink off here. It's character. It's just adding character, but I do love the Roanoke Rust-Oleum stain. Did y'all see the farmhouse table that my husband Chris made for me? Oh, well, I had to. Oh my gosh, I loved this color on that wood, so I knew that this would just do this piece justice. I let my stain dry overnight, and now I'm going back in with, oh yes y'all, some black wax and some natural wax. I just love the age it gives to pieces. So my last makeover for this video, I'd like to say that I saved the best for last. Okay, the one probably with the most steps, but cubbies. Oh my gosh, cubbies sell well. These little door cubbies that people can use as medicine chests. Oh, just love them. But it's a little dated style. It's a little bit outdated. Now it's the same thing as with those hinges earlier, that if I go to try, because it's such a thin aluminum hinge, they just end up stripping. So we're going to work on this with the hinges and the doors attached. And when I'm sanding it, I'm not going to take all that crackle away. My thought process is when I go to paint it, I don't want as much crackle as on there. It's so uniform. I really just want a little bit here and there. So I'm going to sand certain spots smooth, leave some of the crackle here and there, and we will see how this goes. Now this is an MDF board, so when sanding it, it's kind of hard just to get the paint and not go down to the MDF board, which is almost like, you know, it's a pressed wood pulp, basically kind of like a cardboard, but not quite a cardboard, but you know what I mean. Just like before, I can't get my Orbital sander into every place I could get my mouse sander, but sometimes it's just as easy to go in and hand sand it. But you need to do that because your final paint job will really show if you do not sand down that texture in those corners. Since I exposed a lot of that MDF board, we got a lot of different textures going on here. I'm going to even out the porosity with a couple coats of shellac, and I know y'all that I left those holes. I have tried to fill the holes on these type of cubbies before. That is just a really thin material, and even with Bondo, they seem to get pushed out by the time I have been working on it and painting it and waxing it. So I'm just going to like the hinges, life lesson learned, save yourself the headache and just leave them as is. After my couple coats of shellac were dry, I am going to go ahead and prime this piece. Actually, I was going to paint a good portion of this piece with the enamelware paint in white, but this has happened to me before, unfortunately, that this is glossy. It is not the matte that I like. So it is covering, as you see, very well, and I wanted to keep the inside and the back and all that, the white, but since it's so glossy, I'll probably end up painting over it. Yes, these colors go by their cap colors, and if the cap color gets switched around, next thing you know, you have a different paint. And I'm going for that old-timey color again, but on this time, I am using a Pantry door. Oh, I've used this one and I love it. It's a lot lighter than the ones I've been using throughout this video, but it's still a yummy color. So while I'm waiting for my first coat to dry, I'm going to go in the inside and use some of the Parchment by Fusion to tone down that really shiny. I know it might have been okay, but I'm just not a fan of really shiny, and I think really shiny kind of scuffs up, and I wanted to give it a little bit of age with some waxes, and I don't think this shiny enamel will accept that wax very well. So between the crackle that I left behind and the milk paint itself crackling, oh, look at that. Is that not gorgeous? Now, I have to go in and hand sand this with some 220. I don't want to use the power sander on it again because I don't want to get back down to quite a bit of the MDF board. Probably some of it will come through, and that's the character that I like. So, yep, I'm just going to make sure that everything's nice and smooth. I'm going to go down on the edges and get those details a-poppin'. Because this is such a much lighter green, I'm going to start off with some of the Fusion's antiquing glaze and then just rub it all around. That's going to give this piece some beautiful age. So it's a wipe on and then a wipe off the excess. So as yummy as that look, it's the black wax that actually stuck into the crackle on that side that I just showed you. So I'm doing a little bit of black wax, rubbing it in with some clear wax, and that's the wax that is getting it to pop. And then to finish this project up, I'm just going to add some of these little rubber feet that you get off Amazon so that you don't have paint or, you know, a painted surface rubbing and then rubbing the paint off or getting paint on the surface that you have it on, just as a protective barrier. So thank you so much for watching today's video. I sure hope that you enjoyed just sharing ideas with you of what you can look for when you're out in the wild looking for items to decorate your home, or even items that you may be a reseller. Yeah, so give me a quick comment down below. Which of the items I made over for you today was your favorite? And have I inspired you to look at secondhand finds in a new way? Thanks again for watching. If you're part of our YouTube family, thank you so much. And if you want to be part of our YouTube family, just hit that subscription button along with the notification bell so you know we've uploaded a new video. And we will see you next time, guys, and you can see what we're up to. Bye.